Hi there, my name is Michael, and I've been playing Spiritvale for around 60 ish hours. Probably some of those are AFK, but I am a big fan of games like this, and this game in particular. It's become one of my most anticipated games, and I think I'm falling in love with, the simple gameplay style, but the complexity when it comes to build crafting and the like player expression that really shows when it comes to gear and which skills you take, and I'm really liking it. I just wanted to put together a quick list of the feedback that I've compiled. By no means am I saying this is factually correct. Just simply some observations or things I'd like to see, um, just to maybe feel a little bit more complete, a little bit of polish. Right. That's my main. I have like two feature requests near the end, but um, most of it is about polish and making it feel a little more solid. Forgive me if I included anything that's already been previously recommended. I trolled through the suggestions channel on Discord and I removed a few of the easy ones that I saw after a quick glance, but I I thought leaving a few of the big ones would be better for a complete list for this video. So, first up is pathing. Uh, One of my main issues is with how difficult it is for Click to Move to fully understand where you want to go. It very much wants to, it tries, but in a lot of cases, if it is a hard corner or if it is a particularly niche little outcropping, let's say a rock that looks rounded, the game doesn't like rounded. And I presume that's because it's a little like the actual collision boxes aren't maybe as round uh, as the visuals are, but I'm not going to presume. Um, the pathing when it comes to enemies losing aggro can be a little frustrating, right? Let's say I'm rounding things up on. I'll put some footage from leveling an early night or something like that. Let's say I'm rounding up enemies, and I kind of line of sight one of the mobs with like a tree or something like that. They will sometimes, and very often I should say, just kind of sit there and be like, "Oh, it must have been the wind," right? Like it feels like that is less of an aggro issue because I can, let's say I'm taunting and I go across the map, I can pull a mob pretty far, right? Like that's not the problem, but um the actual line of sight, them just kind of being lost on how to get around the tree, can be a little annoying when you're grouping up mobs. And then another issue that I'll try to find footage for, but sometimes the auto attack is super delayed because you'll be following an enemy who walks away or walks in a certain direction, and you do this little stutter step where I don't know if it might be a pathing issue or maybe an like a range problem on an auto attack, but it's been with multiple characters that your character stutter steps behind them and never actually hits them until like they come to a complete stop and your character can kind of catch up. It's a little awkward. Um, the other thing is the terrain having some harsh collisions. So this is a lot more notable on places like Forest Labyrinth, for example, where you can see visually that it is a rounded corner. But as for right here, I'm in a pocket that exists, right? I'm holding left right now, and like I can't walk around it until I finally break free, you know? And right here, I'm in a pocket. I can't go forward. And it can be pretty awkward. Um, and like I said, I think that's one of the reasons it kind of messes up the the pathing on clicks, right? Like I imagine, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not gonna assume. But yeah, these feel kind of rough. Even with WSD, if I try to get around this, I can get stuck in this little corner really easily. And then to go along with that, there's a little bug, I guess, where maybe it thinks I'm on a walking path, but when you dodge, you just have like a little roll, right? But if I'm stuck in one of these little cracks and I dodge, it'll look like I'm going, and then you get rubber banded back, right? Because I'm dodging to a walkable spot, but the game recognizes that I'm not supposed to be able to dodge over terrain, right? Which is why it kind of rubber bands me back. So these can feel pretty bad. This happens in a lot of areas where you can get stuck. I mean, anywhere you can get stuck, it'll happen. But in particular, there's a funny one I'll show that on a windy desert, if you have a ranged attack, or if they walk close enough, you can roll off and attack these mobs while your collision thinks, or while your player thinks it's at the bottom, and then you'll be safe up here, and they can only hit you for the split second that you're at the bottom. So it's kind of funny. It's not optimal by any means, but it's a funny little method you could use to get some early kills if you wanted to mess around. That's it for the pathing. I'm not going to harp on that. I'm certain that the team has thought, and I say the team, but it's a solo dev, I guess. But next up is user interface stuff. Real quick, I would love to see a few more spots where we can see stats. I see if you hover, there's a lot of some specific stats that you don't normally see, like the damage reduction %, like the total, which kind of, there's two different ones for defense and magic defense, and then even like health bonus, for example, like that's cool. The 4 that I would like to see is the reflect % total. I think that would be really nice, just because for someone using a reflect build, that is such an important number that it'd be really nice to have. And total leech chance and total leech power, both mana and health, I think would be really, really helpful. Just, as you know, getting the right build can be difficult to balance how much you actually need. So getting like solid numbers easier, I think, would make that a lot smoother. As well as move speed. I think having a spot where you can see your move speed would be very cool, just because there's so many things that can affect it, right? From items and gems and everything. For inventory, I would love to see a better quick visibility on the gear in your inventory. So, for example, these 3 Azure Prisms, I would love to see maybe like a small +3 or like a small star in the bottom right, or a small little plus sign, or maybe a different colored text, something like that, to indicate that it is a +3 on the base stat. We don't have to. I don't think you really have to bog the icon down with all 3 base stats, unless you find some particularly unobtrusive way to do that. But if you're farming gear and you're not even going to consider, for example, like a little bit later game, you're not even going to consider a +1 in the roll or something, then having that quick visibility would be really nice. And if you want to just have like a star or something, then that star could be like colored based on the stat that it's +3, right? So it could be a little red star for strength, or a little purple star for agility, a little blue star for int. I think that'd be cool, maybe not a star to clash with the favorite functionality, but maybe something else. It would also improve build sharing, right? So if I'm sharing a picture of this, they know what stats not only I have on my allotted points, but also what stats my gear is, and that would be useful. I would also like to see control and shift left mouse button work on some of these other vendors, like the material vendor. I'd love to be able to do that, or on the craftsman. I would love to be able to buy multiple of a specific gear rather than the little bit clunky UI that it is right now, clicking 4 times per craft just to get one roll, right? Um, and that's it for inventory. For skills, the only thing I'd like to see is a little bit smoother, maybe like a left click add, right click remove situation for the points. Right now, because this undo kind of undoes everything, it can be a little frustrating sometimes when you mess up, or unless you're applying and then doing one skill and applying and doing another. You have to be really careful if you don't want to mess with that. And every time you reset your skills, because your bars get reset, it can be doubly frustrating to put all your skills back. As for dependencies, like to have cloaking, for example, you have to have 1 point in shadow step, or for the mage skills, you have to have 3 points in the higher ones to get firebolt, for example. I think it would make a lot of sense just to, if I'm right clicking to remove points from shadow step, it won't let me remove any more points below 1 if I have a point in cloaking, right? That makes sense to me. And that's how some of it's already done with, I can click the bottom. If I have 5 points, I can click the bottom of the venom coating or blade dance, and it'll give me points in shadow step and cloaking automatically because it has to be there, right? So I think that would be very useful. For the settings, I think the hotkeys being a little more grouped up, right? So let's say like a border or something for each skill bar, and then a border for like movement. I think that would be a little useful. This is just from a UX experience. It's like it's a little intimidating when you're like, okay, skill 1-4, skill 2-4. But I like the functionality regardless, right? It's nice. I would love another slider for some different sounds. Uh, even like one more slider for like ambient sounds or like other players' sounds. So things like the blacksmith, or if I'm well, trading's been disabled in in this town, but if I'm over here trading with people from their vending character, and someone comes over here and starts hitting this dummy, it's just like it's a little annoying. I'd like to see at least one more slider, or so I don't have to do that if I know I'm going to be sitting in the vending area for a little bit. And then I would love an optional like click through for these bars down here. Optional definitely, because I know there's a lot of people who play these games by clicking, and also for accessibility reasons, I would never want to remove the ability to click. But if I'm trying to fight and I'm like moving or something, if you're holding it, it doesn't affect it. But if you click down here, it is just going to cast the skill instead of moving you, which can harm you, right? If enemies are coming. I have a couple more rapid fire ones. I think that the player resource bar that goes under, like your health, HP, and your dodge, I think it should have priority over enemy health bars. So as you can see right here, it has priority over the bunny, right? And even over like most things. Like it has priority over the tree. The only thing it doesn't seem to have is priority over the mouse. But whenever you are fighting something, and of course I went to a low level area, whenever you're fighting something, it doesn't have priority over the enemy health bars, as you can see here. So if you have a lot of people, like that, for example, if you have a lot of mobs, sometimes it can be really difficult to see when your health moves. And that it's a bigger buff for classes like Knight that can pull, a bunch of players, or Paladin, that can pull a bunch of mobs. But I'd like to see that too. And also, party members' health bars and stuff. I'd like to see that over enemy health bars. A small icon to represent your progress on your weight in your inventory, I think would be nice. Without having to press tab just to check it. Even like a small right above the bag, even a small little weight icon, the little square, or not square, but it's like a parallelogram or something with a handle. And then, even that shows above a certain percentage or something, I think would be really nice. You can get fancy and make it change colors or something, but even a small reminder so that it avoids players dying to being overweight, because I personally don't consider that like a particularly interesting skill to have, is not dying to managing like the weight of your inventory whenever you can already hold like hundreds of things. Like it's kind of awkward. Queued skills causing the loot hotkey to not work sometimes can be frustrating. I'm sure that I've seen this one. This is one I left in, but sometimes your loot hotkey just like doesn't work, and you have to click to cast whatever skill you queued up and then loot. I'd really like a solution for that, just because it just adds that little bit extra, like, okay, the game didn't do what I wanted it to do, right? Like I tried to click a couple times and nothing happened, and that would be nice. And then one of the low-hanging fruit, I guess, is the way that hair interacts with helmets. I know that's a little tougher based on how many hair models and the different types of helmets and stuff, but I think that would, it's just another thing. Whenever you can choose what gear to have on your character, it's nice whenever that's like an important aspect, right? Because now if I wanted to show my helm because I like the red that it goes with the costume, for example, it's going to look a little awkward with the little bangs, but whatever. It's a small low-hanging fruit that I'm not worried about. The last two, that's my feedback or my suggestions, right? More so feedback. The last two are just quick feature wish lists that I'd like to see. The first one is something I'm certain you've already considered or thought about, but a codex of items in the game, like an internal codex would be really nice. Anything to keep players from, or reduce the amount of times a player clicks out of your game to look something up, I think is always going to be a little bit better. So whether it's a different button down here or whatever, just to show like which items are available in which areas. You don't have to get too specific, right? You can keep it as simple as, like, say the swamp. All of this stuff right here is showing which creatures are in there. If there was just like another box lower that shows some of the items that you can get from this area, I think that would really help. Just giving like a little hint of or a crumb of a hint, right, on what they can get and where, instead of having to open up the wonderful info site that I believe was made by either a player or a supporter or whatever. It's a great site. I've used it so much, but I think having even a little bit of that would be great in the game. And the other one is my concerns about the scalability for mob farming. And right now it doesn't seem to be a huge issue, except for, if you've ever wanted to farm, especially players like priests or paladins or even summoners, where you can really farm solo. I know that that's not the aim for this game, so I hope I don't lose you there, but even in a party, if you go out, say you get together and you want to farm a place like Fairy Glen, that's a really low example. So if you want to farm a place like Goblin Village, for example, the map is large, which means that it's not feasible for one party to take up the entire map worth of spawns, right? Which is great. The way that it was designed is amazing. I love it because it splits up players so that multiple farming parties can be had. And I've noticed that that's the case for a lot of these high level zones, right? It seems like there's a little bit more thought put into what they will look like with a bunch of people farming. It can feel a little frustrating at lower levels. So, for each of the desert zones, it really feels uh, like only a couple people. Like the Treant Trail is great because there's the same mobs all over the place. The Forest Labyrinth is a little rough because sometimes there's only one zone per mob, right? I'm just a little concerned about it in preparation for early access and even full launch, right? So the only two options that, come to my mind are like adding additional zones that contain more of the same mob. That's a little bit heavy handed, I think. But I really like the later area and map design. Um, like I said, Goblin Village is my big example where it's like there can be like 4 parties on Goblin Village, if you really wanted to, especially with how respawns work. So uh, having maps that better promote like splitting up players and groups so that even if there's like a solo guy that just wants to take out a couple mobs, maybe not farm the whole map, but um, I think it'll get worse as the player count grows to the point where party farming is necessary, which I think is a good thing. But at low levels or farming low level zones, I do not think it's a good thing because anybody not in a group in Forest Labyrinth, whenever there's even like 200 more players, is going to have a bad time, right? A low level that's just starting out taking out mobs. And it's also not an engaging mob farming experience because it's an everlasting problem since lower level monsters can drop pretty good cards and gear. So it's not that engaging of an experience when you're in a group to kill low level monsters, right? Because the dog pup or whatever is only in one zone, or the fledgling or something like that. But ultimately it's fine right now, right? You can always kind of get around it or go farm something else. But those are some things I would love to see some consideration put into, or maybe I'm just interested to know if there's plans for like the mob farming scalability concern. But that's it. Sorry this was a little long. I just wanted to share my feedback from playing. Again, I really love the game, and I want to see it succeed because this is great. I love it. Thanks for watching.